Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk today about Winston Churchill. And I admired Winston Churchill. He had his faults, and that was true that he did call Gandhi a half-naked faker. In 1931, he was so distraught and upset over even the slightest idea of independence of India. And I believe Churchill was wrong on that, and he shouldn't have called Gandhi what he called him. But Churchill stood up to the evil Nazis, and Churchill really felt bad for the Jews with what Hitler was doing to them. And he vowed to exterminate that Nazi-like evil from Europe, which is why he didn't appease the Nazis the way his predecessor Neville Chamberlain did. He told the Germans that he will fight them on the beaches, he'll fight them on the streets, he'll fight them wherever. And had that not happened, more than likely the Germans would have invaded England, because the people in the UK would have thought the Germans were kept true to their word of not invading England. They would have raised the white flag, and then they would have let their guard down, which is what Churchill thought if he had went into negotiations and gave the Germans a free hand in Europe. People from the UK responded to Churchill's call, though, very well, and they fought the Nazis tooth and nail for 2 to 3 years without the Americans. And the UK was bombed day after day by German planes. And then after the Battle of Britain, the German bombing stopped, but V-1 and V-2 rockets were launched from Germany and hit quite a few places in London. But the British fought on. But Winston Churchill was the main person, or the main politician, that knew you couldn't appease an evil like Nazi-like evil. And he knew that. And had it not been for Winston Churchill, no other member of Parliament may have not stood up to the Nazis the way that he did. And his military secretary, after the Battle of Britain, saw Churchill, and Churchill said, "Don't speak to me," that he was, and the military secretary said he was moved. And then Churchill said something that no other time in history has so many owed so much to so few. He was talking about the pilots in the Battle of Britain. And also, Churchill was part of the British military expedition in Sudan, and they were going to take care of Sudanese General Omdurman, and he was part of the Islamic Empire over there. And the Sudanese had grievances with the British forces and the British in Africa. But one of the grievances that they had was they were going to stop the Sudanese from enslaving black Africans. And that's one of the reasons that the British went down there, to crush Omdurman, and also to avenge a key British general that got killed in a battle in Khartoum. But the British were trying to keep the Arab Sudanese from enslaving the black Africans. As much as Churchill didn't like people of color, he didn't want to see them enslaved. He believed in Britain's mission in Sudan to his very bones. And we need to know that about Churchill, because he didn't like what the Nazis were doing to the Jews, and he didn't believe that blacks should be enslaved. And also, Churchill was not the, capitalist, very few get rich under my administration. No, he's responsible for English workers getting a tea break, a government recognized a mandatory tea break during the workday. Winston Churchill is responsible for that. He brought that into legislation, and he also brought in the unemployment insurance. So for people who are unemployed to have insurance, Winston Churchill made that possible. So we need to thank Winston Churchill for that. And he had his faults, but he stood up to Nazi evil when it needed to be stood up to. And when Britain was preparing the coastal defenses for the Battle of Britain, he went to the British coast to inspect them firsthand. He met with the soldiers. He thanked them for what they were doing, and he was definitely a hands-on prime minister in that situation. And he loved his wife, Clementine. She supported him. She loved him wholeheartedly. And when Churchill had high anxiety at times during the Battle of Britain, she stood by him. She listened to him. She was definitely supportive, and they had a really good marriage. Now, there was some possible evidence that when she went to Bali, that she had a brief fling with an art dealer over there, but whatever it was, we don't know for sure, but Winston Churchill forgave that. And Winston Churchill told it like it was. He was very direct. He told a socialist member of parliament, Bessie Braddock, when she told him he was drunk, he said, yes, he said, Madam, I'm drunk. I'm drunk. You're ugly, and I will be sober in the morning. And that's Churchill for you. And he also smoked about 8 to 10 Cuban cigars a day. He was a heavy smoker. He wasn't a saint, but at the same time, he definitely stood up to evil. He was responsible for the tea break, the mandatory tea break that workers get in unemployment insurance. So he had a deep love and affection for the British people. And people need to remember Winston Churchill. Boris Johnson wrote a book called The Churchill Factor, and it's a really good book. And the problem is a lot of people now believe that Winston Churchill is a dog in an insurance commercial, particularly the younger British. So Winston Churchill is slowly fading from memory, but I don't like that happening, because Winston Churchill, had it not been for Winston Churchill, the Nazis may have taken over all of Europe, and probably would have. Yes, Winston Churchill suppressed the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya, which he should have not done. He didn't grant India their independence when people from India wanted it, and he should have done that. I mean, there was a lot that Winston Churchill shouldn't have done, but there was a lot that he did right as well. And what I had listed, he did right. And the reason the U.S. and the U.K. have a special relationship is because Winston Churchill made sure that the Americans knew how bad the Nazis were and what the Nazis were doing, so the Americans would fight Germany, declare war on Germany and Italy. And Churchill did a good job that way. That gamble paid off too, and since then the U.S. and the U.K. have enjoyed a special relationship. So props to Churchill for that. Actually, Churchill's mother was American. He is not an excuse the way he felt about people of color, but there was evidence that either his mother or somebody in his mother family had gotten raped by an Iroquois Indian. But you can't take that incident. One, we don't know that for sure, and then two, you can't take that incident out on the entire population of people who are not white. That's just not the right thing to do. Anyways, that's Winston Churchill for you. Anyways, hope everyone's doing well. Take care. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.